The first October surprise has arrived, and it's not exactly what anyone was expecting. However, what is happening right now could definitely have some consequences here in the near future. So stick around for the rest of the video. We're going to talk about 3 different SHTF outcomes that could possibly happen that we should prepare for based on the fact that the President of the United States has been affected by the pandemic. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're going to talk about how the first October surprise has revealed itself and 3 different scenarios surrounding the possible outcomes of what could happen after the fact of the president being personally affected by the pandemic. A lot has been going on since October, and as you know, it's only been a few days. But we can see that things are escalating quickly towards the election. And we all need to start preparing for some of these more obscure ideas to actually become reality, as every single day it seems like something changes and something moves further towards that midnight position on that doomsday clock. Now, I don't think what's happening right now is going to trigger some kind of a doomsday situation. However, there's been a lot of chatter about it lately because of those planes that were activated on the same day that we received this announcement. So if you're preparing for things to go south in November and you're preparing for the different possible outcomes related to SHTF scenarios that we could expect to see here soon, hit the subscribe button below, because we're going to keep talking about all these different possibilities so that we can be better prepared for them to happen if they ever do. Of course, we don't actually want these things to happen. A lot of this is theoretical based on the different information that we have, but it's things that if they seem plausible enough, we should at least prepare for them to be a reality, as in the year 2020, I think all of us have learned that just about anything is possible, okay? So the first possible SHTF related outcome for the current situation facing the president, and the one that I'm going to start with is going to be one of the less appealing situations that could happen. But if the president was to fall to the pandemic, if the pandemic was to take the president out of the current position of power that he's in, what happens then? How do things look in that situation? I don't think this is a likely scenario. However, it is something we should prepare for, because things do happen, and sometimes things are out of our control no matter how much power, influence, and money we throw at them, okay? So if this happens, a leadership vacuum would ensue, which means that suddenly everyone's scrambling to find out who is going to be in charge of fixing the world's problems, because the leadership position that we're talking about is the leader of the free world. So this isn't a situation where they have to figure out who's going to be the next CEO of a company or who's going to be the next manager at a store. They have to figure out who's going to lead the entire world towards a better version of freedom. And what happens in that situation is the line of succession, which means that other people inherit that ability, that power, and that authority based on what's written in the Constitution. So that line of succession currently would look like Vice President Mike Pence would be first in line, followed by the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Then you get into the idea of Chuck Grassley taking the position. The reason behind that is because he's the president pro tempore of the Senate, which is something I had to write down because I haven't used it very often in my vocabulary. But he is actually third in line when it comes to succession of the president. And after that is the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. So, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that we should prepare for things to be extremely chaotic, this close to an election, this many different names being thrown into the hat of possible authority figures taking over the position of President of the United States of America, and the fact that it's from both sides of the aisle. If you're talking Mike Pence, that's one thing, but if we move further down that ladder to Nancy Pelosi, that's an entirely different situation, and you're going to have different sides of the country losing their minds based on the fact that this leadership vacuum was created, based on the fact that people would think that now is the time to change the rules to make sure that whatever they feel is best would happen. And now is the time to instigate chaos, because when a leadership vacuum exists, it's the best time to undermine authority. And that's exactly what would happen. So if it went to Mike Pence, things would be a little smoother just because he is already part of that administration. But the second it changes sides and goes over to the blue side of the aisle, and Nancy Pelosi was to somehow inherit that position, things would go off quickly and in a bad way. The country would not accept that kind of a transition of power so easily. That's just how bipolarized we are at this point. And now, this close to an election, it would cause some serious constitutional crisis. So we should prepare for that to be a possibility. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't want it to happen, and nobody should, regardless of your political affiliation, wishing that upon what's considered to be the most important position in the entire planet is a terrible thing to do. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about these possible scenarios. This is not a wish list of things that we want to happen. This is preparing for the worst and hoping for the best at its finest. So consider that to be a highly likely possibility, because the more you prepare for something and the more you consider it a reality, the more you'll be prepared if it ever does occur. And if it doesn't, you'll still be glad you were preparing for it either way. And civil unrest and the chaos that the country would experience after that kind of a scenario would be out of control. Not to mention all of the additional lockdowns, restrictions, and requirements that would suddenly be thrown on the people, because obviously if this pandemic is that problematic to where it removed the leader of the free world from their position, everyone else needs to really step it up and make sure that things happen in a certain way so that it doesn't happen ever again, if you get my drift, okay? So that is one possibility. Another possibility we should at least consider, the number 2 possible SHTF outcome for what's happening right now when it comes to the President of the United States of America, is that he fully recovers, maybe recovers quickly, has a clean bill of health and a perfect recovery. That is definitely something that can happen. And that's definitely something that I hope happens. And it's not because it's political, it's because, like I said before, nobody should hope that that seat ever goes empty, because the chaos that ensues afterward is not something anyone should have a palate for, okay? So, how does that look if that happens? Well, there's a few ways that can go. But one of the ways that I think we should all consider and at least prepare for and have your mind ready for what might come afterward, okay, is the idea that if there's a quick recovery, things go well, that there's definitely a good chance that you could see a cure of some sort being pushed quickly and becoming a mandate of some kind. The reason behind that would be because either there is some kind of a reason for that quick recovery that now needs to be shared with the rest of the people, or because of the other people out there who want to utilize crisis like this to further their influence and power, using the idea that, look, this could have gone really badly, and look what happened to the President of the United States. We can't let this happen to another single person. We are going to expedite the creation of such cure, push it through the process, and then push it out there to the public and mandate that it starts to be implemented upon the public, okay? And I'm using certain phrasing and language here because sometimes you have to be a little bit careful about how you say things, or else none of you would even be watching this video right now. So what I'm going to say is that, yes, there is certain factions in this country that are either pro a cure or against some kind of a cure. The other thing we have to consider, and when I say cure, I understand this is viral and it doesn't really work that way. Understand what I'm trying to say when I say those words. But either way, somebody will utilize that situation to try to make things happen faster and try to expedite and try to get things going. And as we already had this telegraphed to us at the last debate, that things could be within a few weeks away. And if that's the case, do you think that they're going to hold back on the reins when the President of the United States of America is actually being affected by this currently right this second? You tell me, and trust me, leave comments below so we can discuss these different scenarios. I'm only giving you 3 in this video because I don't want to discuss the 25 different scenarios that could happen. I want to try to get your brain moving in the direction of how do I prepare for what's happening right now, okay? These are things we have to consider and I think are definitely very important for us to kind of look into our little crystal ball and see into the future the best we can so that we can mentally prepare for what might happen even if it doesn't actually happen, okay? So, that's something I could see happening. An expedition or expedited situation involving a cure to be pushed on everyone and possibly mandated based on the fact that, thank God the recovery was quick, but we need to make sure this never happens again. So consider that a possibility. Is that something I want to have happen? No, in the sense of mandating some kind of a cure. Is it something I want to have happen in the sense of the President of the United States recovering from some kind of an illness? Yes. And Generally, regardless of who the president is, that's how everyone should feel about that position. It still has a level of respect and authority to it that we should all just at least hope it doesn't just end up going empty at some point unpredictably, okay? That's how I'm gonna say that. Anyway, the third possible SHTF outcome that could happen based on the information we have right now. And this is something that we really need to consider. This is something that every one of you should be preparing for, at least in the sense of an overall generalized preparedness plan. But we can see how these dominoes are starting to fall into place, and it seems like we're inevitably heading in a direction of some type of a conflict with a foreign entity, okay? So here's what you have to consider. Either way that this thing goes, whether or not the president falls to the pandemic, or whether or not the president recovers strikingly fast, who knows? Either way that this goes, this still puts us in a situation, and here's how I'm gonna word this. I wanna just say this the right way, okay? The leader of the free world was infected by a biological threat of foreign origins, either through negligence or worse, malice, okay? So consider that situation. Regardless of anything else happening in the world, at any other point in time in history, can you imagine a scenario where a pandemic started in a foreign country controlled by one of the few other superpowers on the planet, China, and that virus somehow made its way all the way to the White House? Does that sit well with anyone, regardless of the reasoning behind it, regardless of the level of accidental, regardless of the level of anything regarding this whole situation? You have to admit and you have to consider the concept that the President of the United States is currently affected by a pandemic that started in a foreign country. And that pandemic has made its way around the world to the point of affecting multiple world leaders. And at some point, people are going to ask, when will someone be held responsible for this? When is someone going to be held responsible for the President of the United States falling ill to a pandemic that was produced and has origins in a country that we know we have tough relations with? Let's say it that way. Is this something that you have to consider? That the idea of a conflict on a global scale, or whether or not in a localized scale, let's say the South China Sea, is that more possible at this moment? Are people going to use this situation to say, we need to hold them responsible? This is unacceptable. We have been told time and time again that this is due to negligence, or this is due to malice. And now it's affecting the President of the United States. Are you going to just let that one go? Are you going to just let it slide? Or is something going to happen in the sense of holding somebody accountable for the fact that this even occurred? This is not something I'm hoping for, and this is something I don't want to have happen. I don't want you guys to misunderstand when I say these things. These are thought exercises for you to consider other possibilities that could occur due to what's happening right now. And this is the first October surprise. When I say that, it's because I think there's going to be more. This isn't the only one, and this is the lead up. You can almost call it an introduction to SHTF situation, because this can then spiral into many other situations that we are talking about right now. And I wanted you guys to understand that regardless of how this turns out, whether or not it's a speedy recovery, whether or not it is the worst case scenario, either way, this could be looked at as being a problem on a foreign level, and things could definitely escalate quickly if somebody decides they want to hold them accountable for what's happening over here in the United States right now. Definitely considerations we need to make. We all prepare constantly to be more ready for different things that could possibly happen. And these are all possibilities that are occurring to me, at least as of right now. And I think that with the amount of just tumultuousness around this election, and with the amount of vitriol that's out there in the world, it's very easy to see something like this spiraling into some kind of a conflict that nobody else necessarily expected or saw coming due to what the catalyst might have been, which could be what we're seeing right now. So I wanted to take some time before I made this video and just give you some ideas about how you can prepare or what to prepare for, and then use this as a moment just to remind you that we're coming up on November. We're getting close. We have to consider the possibilities as being worst case scenario and then hope that they never exist, okay? So without anything else to say about the 3 different possible SHTF outcomes related to the fact that the pandemic has finally affected the President of the United States of America, that's gonna be it for Magic Prep.